morning, Scoop Nation, and you are listening to the Morning Scoop for Tuesday, October 18th. Today, joining me will be TJ Downing. On the recap here we've got from this past weekend, some of the main takeaways from all the big games that did happen. Obviously, there was a few top 10 matchups, a few top 25 matchups that could very seriously impact the college football landscape, particularly in regards to the college football playoff. So we'll cover a little bit of that, cover a little bit of the weekend to come, including some of the biggest matchups this weekend, namely the long-awaited rematch of the 2017 Iowa debacle and how that should play out this weekend for the good guys. Before we get into everything, though, take a few minutes. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to the YouTube channel, and leave a 5-star review if you are listening to the podcast version. That way you can stay up to date on all the latest content as soon as it's released. And without further ado, I will go ahead and welcome in TJ. TJ, how you doing, brother?
Good, my man. How you doing, Ryan?
Always good. It's after the bye week. We've got a full second half of the season to go, and I don't have to miss Ohio State football anymore. So,
Scoop Nation, man. They need that fix, man. They need their Buckeyes back 1 week off. It's like they're jonesing.
I wish I've always said, like, I wish the season was longer because it always goes by so fast. Like, I can't even believe it's already halfway through the year. But then, what is it, 8 months, something like that you just kind of sit around and wait and wait and wait. And yeah, there's NBA and NHL and there's some other stuff that goes on, but like, man, there's nothing like college football.
Yeah, unless you're a diehard like Major League Baseball fan, and you can go through, like, to me, which I think are the two leanest months of the year, like right after the NBA Finals finish,
yep,
all the way up until when training camp starts to kick off, and you get that Hall of Fame game back here in Canton, the Tom Benson Hall of Fame Stadium, and it's like that 2-month run there from like June 8th to like August 8th, and then bam, it's back, and you're loving it. But what I can't even realize and fathom right now is, like, I do a lot of high school broadcasting. For those that want to check out our social media stuff at Stark Media Team on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook. We're already in week 10 of the Ohio high school football season. Like, the playoffs are next week. That just blows my mind. I mean, the weather's cold now. I mean, I think we're supposed to have some 70-degree warmth come through for the weekend for Buckeye football and high school football on Friday, but man, it's like week 10, fall's here, Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year. Hopefully we're in the national championship and wash, rinse, repeat. Wait for next year.
I know. Yeah.
Or wait for spring ball.
I saw some posts that mentioned that, the Ohio High School Athletic Association playoffs were, coming up and everything, but it never even registered with me that it's that
crazy.
Soon. That's insane.
You mentioned, I mean, we wait all summer long, it's a long winter around here. So when we're lucky when we have, typically we have the Buckeyes rolling towards the Big Ten championship, getting into the college football playoff, we're getting that extra football until, at least the 1st of January. You can't really count on the Browns for much. The Bengals, I don't know, you're Columbus guy. I don't know if you're Bengals or Browns, but I never asked you that. Bengals have been kind of carrying their weight, so you got some extra ball games out of them last year. But, it's long winters and long springs and summers around here, so it's like once it's over, you're just kind of waiting for the next year to come around.
Yeah, I unfortunately, my allegiance is to the Browns. So
don't count on them much
for
end of January, early February. Don't count for that much.
Yeah, I'm if it wasn't for Ohio State, I don't know what I would do. Like, I probably wouldn't even be a football fan just because, like, I can't solely rely on the Browns to be my source of happiness. So having Ohio State at least kind of counterbalances that. I can live with the Browns being just absolute garbage for the entirety of their, franchise history. But
until Deshaun Watson gets here, then ease your worried mind.
We'll see. The Browns have let me down so much in the past that I can't believe the hype is real until it actually becomes real. So we'll see. For our luck, Deshaun will come back and, tear an ACL or something week 1. The first week he's back. So
and how, of all things, yesterday does Bill Belichick come in, who used to be our coach, who was booed out of town, who was chased out of town, comes back, becomes the second all-time winningest coach in the National Football League, and he does it with a third-string quarterback.
Yeah, Bailey Zappi, of all people.
Come on, man. That is that's some
Joe
Cleveland
Woods should
Brown
be
stuff if
embarrassed.
I've ever heard Cleveland Brown
Yes.
stuff.
Yeah, no, that's the exact, it's the entire history of the Browns. The Browns are always going to Browns at some point, and that was absolutely that. And the Jets game was the other, just absolute mind numbing. How does that even happen to a football team, a professional football team? Well, professional. But yeah, no, I mean, like, and also just throwing back to that staff too, that Bill Belichick staff. I mean, look at how many of just incredible coaches were on there. Nick Saban, Kirk Ferentz, I believe, was on there. Mike D'Antonio was on there. I mean, that was just an all-star lineup. Looking back in hindsight, obviously, of what they've been able to accomplish.
Look at you, Iowa Week, throwing out nuggets like Kirk Ferentz on that 95 Browns D. Come on, man.
You gotta find it where you can, man.
Respect the game.
Yeah, yeah. But speaking of Kirk Ferentz, I guess we'll go ahead and dive into just some of the college football takeaways here from this past weekend before we dive into the Iowa game and really breaking down kind of what we expect to see out of both Iowa and Ohio State coming up here on Saturday. But obviously there was a number of big matchups. I live in Nashville, obviously. So being down here, Alabama and Tennessee, if you're not an Alabama fan, you're a Tennessee fan or vice versa. So, all I ever hear is Go Vols or Roll Tide. And so this weekend was definitely one that was very interesting to watch, very prime time people watching, if you will. We went out to a bar and got to watch some of it and just see the excitement. But fantastic game. I think we learned a lot about Tennessee, and I think we learned probably more about Alabama. I would say out of the two, if I were to say, just because I think we've kind of been on the cusp of Alabama getting to this point through a lot of the games so far in the season, and seeing them actually fall. Just really solidified a lot of what we had been seeing, that they are down this year, at least to this point. You never, want to give a Nick Saban team an early loss to be able to come back from. And they're definitely not out of it. But I'm curious just from your takeaways this weekend, obviously the other big games, USC, Utah, the Big 12 matchup, Oklahoma State and TCU. What were some of the things that you took away from this weekend as it relates to just the landscape of college football and what the playoff picture can ultimately look like here? I think we have the first rankings in 2 weeks, right?
Wow. Yeah. Season's flying by, man. We just talked about it. But I really enjoyed seeing Tennessee beat Alabama. I think I'd probably speak for a lot of people. Nick Saban can kind of get stale. We've just seen him and heard from him and had to listen to him for so long. I think people are just ready for somebody else in the SEC to step up and do something. Cool little nugget here if you want to. It's actually going to post here later tonight on some Stark Media stuff over on Twitter, Stark Media team. I have an old interview that I was able to do with the OC from Tennessee, and that's Alex Golish. He was with us at Ohio State as a GA back in 05 and 06, one of our real close buddies. And Heupel basically just said, you know what, dude? He was out at Iowa State with Matt Campbell. He said, hey, I need a tight end coach, and I need an offense coordinator. You want to roll out here to Tennessee? And Alex Golish, took the shot, rolled in there. I know it was a little bit lean the first year or two, but man, the way he talked, go back and listen to the interview about Hendon Hooker and how much trust he had in him. Because if you're an offensive coordinator and you want to go out there and you want to say, legit, we want to win and compete inside the SEC, you better have a quarterback who can do it all and that you have faith in and you can trust, knowing that they're going to be going up against guys like Will Anderson and these Alabama defenses and guys that want to rip your head off and guys that are fast, Georgia defenses, win a national championship. That's upper echelon. That's as Power 5 as it gets right there. And Tennessee threw their name in the ring this past weekend. Yeah. And I think that's cool in regards to the college football playoff landscape, because we want to see somebody else out of the SEC come back and do some 98 T. Martin, Peyton Manning type stuff and lead the Vols into a situation like that. Or, let's get some other teams back in the deal that have kind of faded off a little bit. I mean, you feel like you look at Florida State, what they did. I mean, the rise, Jameson Winston, Jimbo Fisher, they leave, and now the program's kind of been garbage for a couple of years. Um, Also, I think, you mentioned the USC game. I don't know what the hell happened there, man, because when I turned it off, it was like
Oh
Utah.
man.
I mean, it looked like they were out of the game. Like, this
Yeah.
thing's a wrap. And then boom, I wake up and I hear Lincoln Riley singing the blues about how they got beaten. I'm like, whoa, what the hell just happened here? So USC needs to kick it into overdrive. I mean, you're coming into the Big Ten. We already know, you and I talked about it last episode, where what does UCLA really bring to the table? I
Yeah.
mean, you got like 5,000-6,000 people that you put into the Coliseum out there for the Rose Bowl for a college football game, and you're coming into Division One, not the Division One, the Big Ten aspect of things, and you can't even pack with 20-25 G's into your stadium. That's a bad look. USC is going to need to be able to carry the load. So when you're in command of games, you have to stay in control of those. And it's funny. You can kind of talk about this real quick when I get done. But I had somebody talk to me today. They were asking about spreads and when you played for Tress compared to Ryan Day and Urban Meyer, they always want to keep their foot down on the gas, score as many points as possible. But Tress was like, you get up by 2 or 3 touchdowns, win with class. We don't need to run the score up. I don't know what your philosophy is, but I'm a type of guy that until there's triple zeros on the clock in the fourth quarter, I want to score every time. And if you can't stop it, that's not my fault.
Yep. No, I agree 100%. I'm of the mindset that because if you do that, in my opinion, you're playing not to lose at that point,
and you're asking to
versus
get
continuing to play to win. And so I'm very much of the mindset that until, like you said, until there's triple zeros, you are trying to put points on the board. You're trying to get stops. You're putting everything in your team to continue to finish that game, because to that point too, you have a team like USC that obviously has struggled this year to finish games. And there's definitely Lincoln Riley's first year. It will come up. I feel like over the next couple of years, just as more and more of the people that he brings in are able to get into the system that he wants to implement. And but we saw it at Oklahoma too. We know what we're getting with Lincoln Riley in a lot of ways, and they are a team that just constantly plays to whatever their opposition is, good or bad. And they can compete with some, high flying teams, but they also are going to, win on a last second touchdown, 17-14 against, what was it, Oregon State, or whatever it was a few weeks ago. And it's like, it is kind of mind numbing, but if you don't play to win the game constantly, then you will come into those games where come late, you need to actually do that. And if you're constantly kind of winning by maybe a touchdown or two, and you're kind of just playing not to lose, I
You're
feel
playing
like
with
those
fire.
games, I feel like those games will come up, and then you'll be on the opposite side of it really
And then
easily.
all of a sudden you get maybe you get a bad official in a game.
Yep.
An official makes a bad call and you let them determine the outcome. That was one thing that we always said when we went out to play. Don't let the officials, even if they make a bad call, determine the outcome of the game, because there's too many plays in the first, second, and third quarter that we're going to run where we can keep the game out of their hands, so that middle to end of the fourth quarter, they make a call and you're like, oh man, that's a garbage call. But you know what? We could have done a little bit better on the third series of the game when we had the ball, and we could have finished that drive off. And we're not even talking about this right now.
Yep.
So yeah, you're playing with fire when you play like that. I was always a proponent of it. Obviously I wasn't calling the plays, but and I don't have a problem pulling right and pulling left every other play. But to an extent, it's like you call a quarterback draw on 3rd and 8 or 3rd and 9, and to me, it's like, let's get that empty backfield package going, and let's try and get surgical here real quick.
Yeah, I don't want to give any opposition reason to think that that they're gaining momentum, in a game. And I think that's in that case, it's very much like that, because defense is going to inject a lot of energy into that offense. They get a stop on 3rd and 8. All of a sudden, that can turn around pretty quickly. Maybe you get a couple pass interference calls, or what have you, and it could be a different game pretty quickly. If you're only up by a couple scores, and you have a team that can either score quickly or not. I don't believe that Iowa is of that capability to be able to score quickly. I do think if you get up a couple scores on Iowa, that's pretty much ball game. But I guess kind of just looking into that game as well. So if you're Iowa, like, what is your game plan coming into this week? Because both teams are coming off a bye, and so you have the extra week in both situations to prepare for this. Iowa's a very physical team. I looked up some of their stats. They're dead last in total offense, 131st.
Averaging 2 touchdowns a
Oh
game.
man, it's bad.
Giving up like 8 touchdowns
Yeah.
a game.
Yeah, so not great. Not a great combination if you're Iowa. They've won most of their, I think, 3 of their 6 games by a one possession. So they're really relying just on like low scoring, staying close. How do you do that against a team like Ohio State?
It's not really going to fare well. The tough thing is you kind of expected them to be a little bit better defensively coming into the season, with Jack Campbell being one of the better linebackers around. I think Riley Moss was the defensive back of the year in the Big Ten last year. And maybe we're touching on something that maybe goes a little bit deeper here than just, these players on the field not getting it done, being 500 on the season. And maybe it is Kirk Ferentz. He's the longest tenured coach in college football. His defensive coordinator, he's the longest tenured defensive coordinator in FBS. It's like, is it time for Iowa to maybe start looking in a different direction? I mean, eventually Wisconsin had to go in a different direction than Barry Alvarez. And since then, you've had a Bielema a year. You had another cat that maybe had a decent year. I can't remember if Chris had a decent year or not at one point. But, regimes have to change.
Yep.
And Kirk Ferentz has had a very strong regime. Let's not get that twisted at all. I mean, I can remember back to 2002. I think this is a game this is when you put on EA Sports all-time games that never happened. How many people would like to see the 2002 Iowa Hawkeyes versus the 2002 Buckeyes? That game never happened.
Mm-hmm.
We shared the Big Ten with them. We were not outright Big Ten champions because Iowa was undefeated as well. And they sat behind us. We played the Hurricanes, and I think they played USC maybe in the Rose Bowl, and I think they got torched.
So.
It was, something Orange Bowl, Rose Bowl. They got torched. It wasn't good, but, I think maybe we're just seeing a moment where we're thinking maybe Iowa should be thinking, hey, we need to split up this duo or bring in some new, fresh blood. I believe, does Kirk's son still coach on the offense? Is he calling plays?
I believe so, yeah. As far as he was at the beginning of the year, and I know a lot of people were calling for his head.
That's just another dynamic within that coaching staff where you're just saying like, okay, maybe is this a reason why we're 3-3? I mean, you always get decent tight ends to go there. Sam Laporta, I guess it's bad when you think about your tight end is actually, your 2 tight ends are your leading receivers. The other one is Lachey's son, Luke Lachey. I mean, when your 2 tight ends are your leading receivers, you are not going to compete with what Ohio State is rolling out there on the field. I mean, the other 3 receivers all have, like, the top 3 receivers behind the 2 tight ends for Iowa, they all average like 150 yards for this season alone. I mean, we've got 3 receivers that have done that in one game.
Yeah. Yeah.
How are you going to compete with that type of firepower?
And it is, it is strength on strength. I mean, they definitely, obviously their defense is solid, but there's only so much that you can do for so long against a team like that has all of the weapons that are available at Ohio State. And, I think in my mind, the only game plan that I could see that would actually, work for Iowa in this game to keep it close is just to, you got to sustain 7-8 minute drives. And, maybe you get a field goal out of it. Maybe you don't. Maybe you're punting and you try to keep Ohio State pinned back, and then your defense can make a play. Like that is the only script, and I think that only works for a half at most. And I don't even see it working in that sense either. But I think Ohio State's going to come out, put up a couple of quick touchdowns. In the first, second quarter, maybe it's something like a 21-7 at half, and then the floodgates open.
The rush game that you're talking about is where I think you have your biggest concern. And, Iowa's not pumping out the Robert Galleries that they used to, or even Ferentz's son when he played. I think he was a first team All Big Ten center. I think the offensive line has been down for a period now on Iowa. LaShawn Williams and Caleb Johnson, I mean, they're basically the same type of back. They both average about 4 yards a clip. Uh, they've scored 5 touchdowns between them. And that's for the entire season. There's only 5 rush touchdowns for the Iowa Hawkeyes this year. If you look at some of their scores, they're crazy. I mean, they won a game they lost to Illinois like 9-6, and I think there was the San Diego State game. It was like 7-6.
Yeah, my favorite was I think it was 7-5 San Diego or South Dakota State week 1, and it was not. They didn't even have a touchdown. There's like 2 safeties and a field goal. Like, how does that even happen?
So they lost to Iowa State 10-7. I mean, they were in the game against Michigan. They played them tough.
Yeah.
So, I think from what you're saying, it makes sense. You try and ride a 2-headed monster, rushing attack, chew up a 6-7 minute drive here or there, try and sustain. I don't know how you attack the Ohio State defense doing that, though. Do you run up the middle and have to deal with Mike Hall and Tommy Eichenberg? Do you try and get outside around Sawyer and Harrison and Steele Chambers, which they're sideline to sideline stretchers, and those defensive ends don't allow themselves to get reached. So what's the run game attack really look like? And you know what you're going to get out of Kirk Ferentz. He loves to pull the guards. He loves to work combination blocks. And really it's just who's the tougher, badder dog in the trenches at that point. So I think we're going to find that out. I think the way that Mike Hall's been playing, I don't see Iowa coming out and bullying Ohio State up front.
No. I think it is it's good to have a game like this at this point, knowing kind of what our issue was last year against Michigan as well. And knowing that I think, the thought process behind that game is going to be, come out and try and punch them in the mouth. And the physicality on defense for this team, I think, will be really important and across the line. And I think, that is what they're going to try to do, is come out and try to bully, this team, and how they react, I think, will be a really strong indicator of what this team has transitioned from last year and from a physicality standpoint, and can help answer a lot of those questions as well. And I think they will. I don't see it happening where, maybe they do quick little dink and dunks across the field, just to get it out of his hands, quickly. They don't give the defensive line time to get home. You're not running into a Mike Hall in the middle of the line. It's just not going to work for you. So, getting kind of maybe in those little underneath crossing patterns, something like that, you can pick up a few yards here and there and really extend some of those drives. I think that's probably a factor. But if he drops back and they try to get some longer plays going, I think the defensive line is going to eat pretty heavily.
Yeah, I don't think there's really any field stretchers. I mean, I think Petras is a good quarterback. You look at some of his numbers. I mean, he averages like 5-6 yards per reception. I mean, he's completed over 50% of his passes. When you throw more picks than you have touchdowns, obviously that's not going to correlate well on the stat line. But he just needs a receiver to step up. I mean, I'm looking through the roster right now. I mean, Reggiani, Bruce, Williams. I mean, Brody Brecht. I mean, their numbers are just anemic. They've got 1 touchdown through those guys. The other touchdown is for Lachey. Again, I go back to what I said. I mean, your 2 tight ends or your 2 leading receivers, there's got to be more creativity than that. It's just not going to get it done offensively. It's not going to keep you in the game against the Buckeyes. I personally think that they do what you said. They try and keep CJ Stroud off of the field. And I'll just throw it out there. I see this as being a Tommy Eichenberg game where he gets Big Ten Defensive Player of the Week. I see Tommy Eichenberg flexing his muscle, having like 16, 17 tackles, having a sack or 2, living in the backfield a little bit. And I think that's going to be the story of the game. And I see it probably being, like a 42-10 ball game. I think we beat them by 30 at least.
Yeah, no, I think that's probably, what's the line? 27.5, something like that.
I think so.
Yeah. So you're probably pretty spot on there. Offensively, I just don't see many more points them them putting up many more
Where's
points
it
than
going to
10.
come from? You know,
It'll probably be what Ohio State has had recently. I feel like all year you give up an early touchdown, and then the defense just takes over for the next 2.5 quarters until the reserves are in, and then they get another score or something.
listen, did you get a chance to ever hear the radio broadcast and call of the 2002 national championship game with Jim Lachey and Paul Keels?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Where Jim Lachey absolutely just goes fangirl at the end of the game and just we won it, just like doing exactly what a color commentator shouldn't do.
Yeah.
And as a total homer for Ohio State, an All-American there, right? I think the only way, you might get the greatest performance ever if Luke Lachey scores. Let's just say he like hat tricks and goes off, has like 3 touchdown receptions in the horseshoe. You're going to be able to hear Jim Lachey all the way from the top of Ohio Stadium screaming for his son, because I just think that's a cool story. Anytime, you can see your son. I kind of did it with my dad. My dad went to Michigan, was a captain All-American. I went to Ohio State, was able to have my run there. And I think what you kind of see with that is, the kid cutting his own path. And I think Luke Lachey probably could have taken the easy route and said, I'm a UA guy. My dad was an All-American and captain here. I can go to Ohio State, even if they're not giving a full ride, maybe just be a preferred walk-on and just use my lineage. And that's really taking the easy way out. So I give the kid a lot of credit. I think he's a really nice tight end. I know Jim's super proud of him. And to see him having some success up there, I know it's not going well for the team, but I'd like to see Luke Lachey continue to be more involved in the offense. And I think ultimately he might end up getting his sniff in the NFL one day. I think that'd be pretty cool. I'm sure that's got to be nice to see from his dad's standpoint. I get to call my son's game back at my alma mater. So shout out to the Lachey family. I'm pulling for him this weekend.
Yeah, great storyline for sure. And definitely, I feel like Iowa is one of those teams where, you can't even really hate them too much. Like, I can hate a Penn State all day long.
Yeah,
I can
right.
hate a Michigan all day long. I can hate Michigan State. For whatever reason, I just like Iowa, they're just kind of the feel-good story in a lot of ways, a lot of the time. And so I would like to see them, to your point earlier with Kirk Ferentz and everything too. Like, I don't know that you can fire Kirk Ferentz. I think it has to be something that's virtually mutual in that regard. He's got to be ready.
Is he athletic director, or did he serve in some type of capacity as that as well? Like, I know he's been the head dude there for a long time, man. And it's almost one of those cult like things on campus, kind of like a Bobby Knight feel at Indiana. That's what he is to that campus. Iowa football has had their moments in the past, but under Kirk Ferentz, they really shined. I know it was funny my senior year when we went out there to Iowa City. It was like, okay, college game days here. We're the number 1 team in the country. Iowa's number 11, and they firmly thought that they could beat us. Their entire fan base was talking this thing up like, we're going to beat you guys. We're going to knock off the number 1 team in the country. It's like,
not so fast. What year was that?
That was 2006. 2006. They had college game day there, and it was out there. We went out there. We put an offensive show on for them.
I was gonna say I was at probably the best Ohio State game that I've ever been to was when I went to the Iowa game in 2009. It was my freshman year at Ohio State, and I was one of the Trestle kids. So I was in the front row of the student section.
Nice.
For a fantastic game, went into overtime. Night, lights came on, everything. It was absolutely insane. But definitely good memories of Iowa. They, like you said, they've had a lot of kind of their runs, short-lived runs. Might be a couple years, what have you. But Kirk Ferentz has done a lot of really good things with not a lot of resources. At Iowa, at least not the same type of resources that a school like Ohio State has, or any of the other kind of major college football programs. And he's been able to create some teams and create an atmosphere that that definitely is unique and something that can pay dividends, here and there.
His problem has always been that you'll get waves of recruits in certain position groups that are really good, and he never seems to get all of those groups good at once, like we do at Ohio State. Like
Mm-hmm.
we have a great offensive line, we got a great receiver group, we got a great quarterback, and
Yep.
we got a good run game. He'll have like a great offensive line, but a garbage quarterback, and like two wide receivers and like
Yeah.
no good running backs, you know? And I just remember, I mean, even the defenses that they had a defense with Chad Greenway and Abdul Hodge. Abdul Hodge played for the Packers, and Chad Greenway, I think, he finishes Minnesota's all-time leading tackler after his career. So, like, you know, you think about guys like Matt Roth and Jordan or Jonathan Babineau, who he had across the defensive line. Like, they would put together like a strong defensive front, but then you could throw for like 400 yards on them.
Yep.
You know, so it's always kind of been his thing. I think the one year, and I'll be hard pressed to remember a whole lot of guys on their defense, but in 2002 when they did go undefeated, and I think they had Brad Banks at quarterback. I mean, they were a fun offensive team to watch at Iowa. Not this two tight ends who are your leading receivers, and you've got two other cats with like 150 yards, you know? And so it's not sexy, it's not pretty to watch, but it's just what they have to work with the recruits and the talent pool that you have in there right now. So, you know, recruiting is a tough ball game nowadays. It's the landscape has changed. NIL has changed it. Transfer portal has changed it. So you live by the sword, you die by the sword, man. I just don't know if Iowa will ever really put together one of those squads like maybe they had over the last, 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. You got to find a guy kind of like a Jeff Heupel and what he's been able to do and kind of build it over a couple years, but it's definitely something that it would take, a little bit of transition and a little bit of time before, they'd be able to build anything like that. And who knows who that guy is, that would be able to come. You got to try and kind of find somebody that's an up and comer. I don't know that many people would be on a short list to choose Iowa to become head coach.
Let's go to Iowa City.
Oh, yeah.
Good times out in Iowa City.
You never know. But no, it's definitely, it should be a somewhat of a decent game there at the beginning. I'm looking forward to getting back to it and seeing these guys come out and be physical and really get back, hopefully get a few guys back healthy from the bye week and see what they're able to do as well. And hopefully not look too far ahead to Penn State the week after, so there's a couple other bigger games this weekend as well. You got Syracuse at Clemson. I think that can tell us a lot about the ACC and what could happen there potentially with Clemson, trying to vie for a playoff spot come end of the season. How does Alabama bounce back against Mississippi State and their, 8th ranked passing offense? So, I mean, you got another air raid attack coming there. But one of the things that I wanted to call out was next week. So October 29th. And I want your thoughts here real quick before we sign off. You got two matchups with Georgia playing Florida in Jacksonville, so neutral site. Florida's coming off a bye week. And you have Tennessee hosting Kentucky. Kentucky also coming off a bye week. And the following week is Georgia and Tennessee. So potential for a hiccup game there from one of those teams. You got a rivalry game in both of those cases coming off a bye. How much does that play in, as a former player as well? Like, how much does it come into play when you have a matchup like that coming up? And trying to avoid some of the back of your mind conversations and discussions and what you're seeing like all over the place around, that matchup and how it's going to define the season versus what you have on the field this week ahead of you.
Yeah, it's hard to say because, a lot of the times when we had a big game on the horizon, I don't ever really remember having a large one the week before. I mean, it was like getting ready for Michigan, but you're playing Northwestern the week before. It just didn't have that same feel like Georgia, Florida. I mean, is that what they call the biggest cocktail party in the world?
Maybe, I think so. I don't know.
I think they do that. They do that in Jacksonville, and it's called like the biggest cocktail party in the world. I'm pretty sure I got the right one there, and I usually don't mess up my cocktails, so I think I'm right. That's a big matchup, man, and I think it helps that it's in a neutral site because playing in a swamp, I'm sure, is pretty tough. I don't think it would be as bad as having to go to Georgia, because those people down in the swamp, man, it gets crazy. The environment, it's loud. It can take you out of what you're doing. So I think that lends its hand to Georgia. I like what Georgia's doing. I'm a huge Stetson fan. I like what he does at the quarterback spot. The Kentucky, I just don't really know what they're all about.
Yeah.
I really don't know what they're all about. I mean, I had high hopes in the season. I think, what did they shoot out to, like 4-0? And then who was their first loss to?
Their first loss.
They lost to somebody went after they were 4-0, and it's like, same old Kentucky. They won the early ones, and now they'll flounder, and will end up being, 7-5 or. So I just don't know what we're going to get out of Kentucky. I see Tennessee handling their business. And I'm not saying that just because I'm homering my guy, Alex Golish, who's the offensive coordinator, but I've always been a fan of Tennessee. Philip Fulmer recruited me when I was coming out of high school. That was the only SEC team that showed any interest in me. I really have always just loved the colors. I'm a big tradition guy. Obviously we have the greatest traditions in college football at Ohio State. But, right behind there with Rocky Top and everything they do down there. I mean, that whole scene last weekend was awesome. The fireworks, the smoke coming out of the stadium, the lights, Neyland Stadium was on fire. The goalposts, the kids walking it up the streets. Yeah. Like, how cool is that? You can just imagine Ohio State students, which they wouldn't let you guys do this, because I remember the police officers would form a triangle around the goalpost.
Yeah.
And kids would try and get in, and they actually let me in the middle of the triangle one year. I think this was the 2004 season. And I got in. No, it was the 2002 season when we won the national championship. The 2002 seasons, I get inside this triangle. And I remember just seeing they were just pepper spraying and bear spraying these students as they're trying to get into this triangle to get to the goalpost. And they're just eating the pepper spray. And it was like, what is going on here? I mean, Madness. You could smell the Crown Royal and the Jack Daniels and the Captain Morgan, and then you smell the pepper spray, and it was intense. All to get the goalpost down. So I would love nothing more than to see a goalpost go down Lane Avenue one day. I think that would be great for college football. It's great for the Buckeyes. But I want to see Tennessee handle their business. I want to see somebody else besides Alabama come out of the SEC, get it done, compete for a national title. And I'm pulling for Hooker. I'm pulling for Golish. I'm pulling for Heupel. I'd like to see those guys get it done.
So if you're picking your 4 for the playoff, based on what you've seen so far, who are the 4 in any particular order? It doesn't have to be an exact order.
Wow. Well, I think definitely Ohio State and Tennessee are going to be right up on top of there. I think that between Georgia or Alabama, one of those two will find a way to backdoor it outside of the championship game and outside of their SEC championship game. I think the safe bet is to assume that Clemson can handle their business and get it done, but I don't know. I don't feel like they've been the same team since the years of Deshaun Watson and kind of trailing off. And, they did some good things with Trevor Lawrence. And I just don't know if I see those type of leaders or players on that team right now. So the fourth spot's opening out there for me. It's not going to come from the Big Ten. I think, the Buckeyes and Michigan, they'll find a way to cancel each other out at the end of the year. But if I'm pulling for anybody outside of Ohio State in the Big Ten, it's for Tennessee to make a run at it this year.
See, I'm the opposite. I don't want to see any of it because I got to live here. So, I can't be around that all year long.
Top 4 right now.
Top 4. I'll give them top 4. I would rather that than just more Alabama, Georgia. Though I do agree. I think one of the other two will get in, probably, assuming Alabama wins out and plays Tennessee in that championship game. Then it would probably be Alabama. But also could be potentially Georgia. Maybe Alabama's the first 2-loss team that we see. Who knows?
Yeah, but, the only other thing I guess we could potentially see, which I know in 2006 when we ended up beating Michigan in the game of the century, people wanted us to rematch in the national championship. Yep. I don't know if this could be a potential year where you see undefeated Michigan, undefeated Ohio State play, and Michigan sits up there, or Ohio State sits at the top, and Michigan falls into the 4th spot, and maybe you get those two in there. You know what? Don't count out Lane Kiffin and what he's doing either. That guy he's one of those guys, man. He could fall into a swamp full of shit and come out smelling like roses.
Somehow,
so don't ever count out Lane Kiffin, man. Dude's got something up his sleeve. He's got that charisma. It's just wild. He's got that aura around him.
Now, so did you see, real quick, did you see the meme that he put out after the Alabama-Tennessee game? It's just a picture of Nick Saban on the sideline. He's like throwing his headset down, and he photoshopped a bottle of mustard in, like it was hitting him in the head. So I thought that was good throwback there to last year's game, Ole Miss and Tennessee there. But yeah, well, that's all we got. So TJ, again, thank you. Have a good one,
my guest picker here.
I was gonna say, yeah. Is there any inside truths to add?
She's got her red and her gray on, so she's pulling for the Buckeyes too.
Beautiful, as she should. Well, hey, I appreciate it, TJ. Have a good night. Take care. And as always, thank you, Scoop Nation, for your continued support. If you've liked this episode, make sure you like this video and subscribe to the Buckeye Scoop YouTube channel. If you are listening to the Morning Scoop podcast, be sure to download the podcast, leave a 5-star review, and also be sure to subscribe here at the YouTube channel once you have a moment. That way you can keep up to date on all the most recent content from Buckeye Scoop as it's released. Of course, all of this and so much more is always available at buckeyescoop.com. So be sure to check out buckeyescoop.com and join the community of Buckeye fans on the most premier site for Ohio State news and information, specifically via our Ask the Insiders board. Tons and tons of content and conversations from that community. So be sure to check that out and join today. As always, I'm your host, Ryan McClincy, and go Bucks.